Good morning. Welcome to AP Computer Science A. Today we are going to cover section 5.5 classes, the basics. So make sure that you have your notes with you. Make sure that you have your repo opened up, type in your name, period, and don't forget to click submit once you are done so you can get credit for this assignment. Today is going to be the first time that we're going to code an entire class together. Now, all of the code that we have done, we started by placing all of our code within the main method. And on the last two sections, we actually create our own methods, but above the main class. Now, when Java runs a program, it will be looking for the runner. It's going to be looking for the main method that will be starting to run through. But today, we are going to create our own class, just like the circle class that was given to us by adhesive. Now, this is a class that we have used, but if we actually go back to Unit 2 of your notes, on 2.4 classes and objects, we actually can see all of the components of a class. A class has a class name, it has instance fields or instance variables, it has constructors, mutator methods, it has accessor methods. Now, mutator methods are also called setter methods because we are able to set the value for the instance fields. Accessor methods are also called getter methods because we can get the value of the instance field or other information such as get area or get circumference, any other algorithms that we can perform. It has a toString method that's going to be telling Java what it needs to print whenever you print the object. It has an equal method that will be telling Java whether two objects that you created are going to be equal or not, depending on your definition of equals. What must be the same in order for two objects to be the same, or not the same but equal to each other. So let's get started by creating a new class. Today what we're going to do, we are going to create a hamburger class. So let's assume that a restaurant chain, a hamburger chain, is going to hire you to be able to create different items on their menu. So we can actually keep track of how many items they sell, to be able to print a receipt, to be able to have some inventory control. So therefore, we're going to create a hamburger class. And what we're going to do, we're going to click on the little plus sign, add a new file. The file says file 2. We want to be able to change the name of the file. We're going to click on the little three dots. We're going to rename it. And we are going to change the name to hamburger. That'll be the name of the class. It has to be the name of the file as well. Notice that the first letter must be uppercase for class names. And now if we go in here, it's going to be blank. First, we're going to have the class name. So it's going to be public class. The name of the class is hamburger. Remember that it must match this name up here. And now we're going to open or close or brace. So the entire class definition will be inside those two braces. So it's going to have the following components. It's going to have instance variables. And they're called instance variables because they're going to belong to an object. We're going to be creating an object. It's going to have a constructor or constructors that are going to be called when we instantiate an object when we create an object. We're going to have mutator methods, methods that are used to change the value of the fields or the variables. It's going to have getter methods one or more. that are used to get the value of the instance variables. And we'll talk about this in a few more minutes. It's going to have a toString method, only one, that will tell Java what to print for the object. It's going to have a equals method, only one, that will tell Java whether two objects are equal. And that's going to depend on our definition of equals. What must be the same in order for two objects to be equal to each other? So let's go and start with the hamburger instance variable. What must they have? A hamburger has two buns, and most of the time they do have only two buns, unless you get a protein burger or a Big Mac. But let's assume that they all have two buns. So they have patties. So we're going to allow the customer to decide how many patties they want. Our instance variables must always be private. It's going to be int, it's going to be patty, will be the number of patties. Now, our instance variables don't need to be initialized. Automatically, they'll be initialized to 0. Notice that on the circle class, they initialize your instance variable to 1.0. So therefore, if we want, we can initialize it to 1 or 2 or 3. For now, we're going to just place it, we're not going to initialize it, so it'll be automatically 0. Now remember that if you only initialize your variables inside your method, then it's going to give you an error. But if it's outside the methods, if it's for the instance variables, you only need to initialize. Int is going to have, let's say, cheese. So how many slices of cheese? It's going to be initialized to 0 as well. And tomato and lettuce. But let's just stick to tomato. Private, we can say whether it has tomato, yes or no. So it's going to be Boolean, tomato, and it's going to be initialized to false. So whenever say Boolean, it's going to be initialized to false. Whenever say an integer, it's going to be initialized to 0. Now let's go and create two constructors. The first constructor will be just no parameters. So it's going to be just a basic hamburger. So it's going to be public. Constructors only have the word public because they can be accessed outside the class. Then it's going to have the name of the class, hamburger. This is going to have the first constructor is not going to have any parameters. So it's going to be a plain hamburger. That means that the patties, how many patties will it have? 1. So the whole purpose of our constructor is to be able to set our variables. Cheese, how many slices of cheese will be plain? Will be just 1. And tomato will be true or false? Will be, let's say, true. Our next constructor will have 3 parameters. It's going to have patties, so be bit, will be P for the number of patties that the customer wants. It's going to be int for cheese, will be C, I'll say CH. And it's going to be tomato, so that'll be a Boolean. Remember that those are formal parameters, and that'll be T. And we're going to set patty will be equal to P, whatever comes in, the number of patties that the customer wants. It'll be cheese is equal to CH, the number of slices of cheese that the customer wants. And tomato, yes or no, will be equal to T. So the whole purpose of a constructor is to be able to set the value of the instance variables. So that's all we need. We can actually go ahead and start using the class. We have our private instance variable, and we have 2 constructors. So let's go back into our main class, and under the main method, let's go and start creating objects. Let's go and create two objects. Let's go and create two hamburgers. Hamburger h1 is equal to, we're going to call the constructor by using the keyword new. We're going to instantiate an object, and it'll be hamburger, and we're just going to do a plain hamburger. Then we're going to do hamburger h2 equals new, and we're going to call our second constructor. So we're going to say I want a double with no tomatoes, so it'll be false. And now let's go and print the first hamburger. System .out.println, and let's go and print h1. And therefore, we created two hamburgers, and we're just going to print the first one and see what we get. We should be able to get the first hamburger, and there's an error. Tomato. So what happened? Did I misspell tomato? And you guys did not tell me. Tomato. Notice that it says, hold on, we cannot find tomato. You misspelled it. So let's go and fix it. You probably saw that before I did. So notice that in here, it prints the name of the class, but then it gives us this. That means that it's going to be printing the memory location where the object is located. But we actually, and the reason that it's doing that is because we don't have a toString method. If we haven't told Java what we want printed when it prints the object, then it has no idea what to print. It really doesn't know what a hamburger has or how we want it to get printed. So what we're going to do next, we're going to code our toString method. It's going to be a public. It's going to be a non-static, so do not type in static, because we are going to be able to use it only when we create an object. It's going to return a string. The name of the method is going to be toString. So whatever gets printed is being printed as a string. Then it's not going to take anything in or braces. And we need to be able to return a string, so I'm going to type in return something. What do we want to print when we print the description of a hamburger? So let's go and create a string, str, equal to, therefore we're going to return str. So what do we want str to stand for? It's going to be, let's say, hamburger. And let's be a little more descriptive. Let's actually go and say how many slices of cheese, how many patties. So it'll come up like on a receipt on the screen as well. So let's go and place a new line in a tab. Then it's going to say the number of patties, or the patty, is equal to plus patty, the variable patty. Now let's go and print how many slices of cheese. So let's go and press enter. Plus, let's go and do a new line inside the parentheses, inside the quotation marks. And it's going to be cheese plus cheese. Now let's go and print whether they want tomato, yes or no. So therefore, will be quotation marks, new line, tab, tomato. So this is for the tab, and then the word tomato, and that's going to be true or false. So we're just going to say tomato. It stands for true or false. So now, if we go back into the main class, now that we have coded our toString method, every time we print an object of hamburger type, it should print this information. Let's go back to our main, and let's go and run it. And it printed what we wanted to print. Now, if we actually print the second hamburger, now I should say 2 patties and 2 tomatoes for the second hamburger, correct? And false. So let me just go and place the additional space that I don't have in here. So that is what the toString method does. It tells Java what to print. If you don't have a toString method, it's just going to give you the memory location. Next, what are the mutators methods for? Mutators are to be able to change the value of the variables. Now, you might say, well, this is a variable. Can I just access the variable directly? So let's say that I want to be able to change the number of patties for the first hamburger. And I say h1 dot patty, and we're going to change it to 5. Now we're going to run it. Let me refresh. I'm going to run it and see what it gives me. It's going to say Patty has private access. So you might say, well, this is private, so you cannot access outside the class. So what if we actually just say get rid of it or say public? And that's going to be a public access. Or even if we say public, now we should be able to access outside the class. So now if we go back and we are changing the number of patties for the first hamburger to 5, now we should be able to say the first hamburger has 5 patties. Right? So you might think, well, why do we need a getter and setter method if I actually can just set the method by declaring this a public variable? The problem that we have that if it's public, then you have no control over the values for the variable. But placing it as private, we have more control because what if the customer says, I want 500 patties? And you place the order, and can we have a hamburger with 500 patties? No. So therefore, what we're going to do, we are going to leave this as private, and we're going to say, customers can only ask from 1 to 5 patties, maximum of 5 patties. So what we're going to do, we are going to place our setter method or mutator methods. It's going to be public, so we can access outside. It's going to be a non-static because we have to use the object in order to use the method. It's not going to return anything, so it's going to be void. The only thing that we're going to do is replace the value of patty. It's going to be called set patty. And we're going to take in an integer. It will be the value of p, which will be the number of patties that we want to change patty to. So patty is equal to p. But we don't want it. So in this case, if we go back and now we use this, that's going to be a method. H1 is going to be set patty, and we are going to send in the argument of 500. That is going to be received as a formal argument of p, and it's going to replace the patty variable to the value that we send in. And now it's still 500, but now we can actually say, if the value is bigger than 5, we're going to leave it as 5. If p, the value that's coming in, is greater than 5, then we're going to ignore the value and we're just going to say patty is equal to 5. Else, patty is equal to p. So now let's go and run it. And we say patty is equal to 500 and say, nope, sorry, maximum is 5. But we have to actually be careful. What if they say patty change it to -2? Well, we also want to control the lowest value, right? So we're going to go back over here and say if patty is greater than 5, set equal to 5, else if p is less than 1, we don't want it to have 0 patties, unless you do, but in this case, I want to at least have 1 patty. Then patty is equal to 1 will be the minimum, else patty is equal to p. So now let's go ahead and run it and see if it actually gives us a 5 instead, right? We say, well, if we want -2, we're going to leave it as 1. If we wanted 200, we're going to leave it as the maximum, which will be 5. Now, we should also have some control. What if they, at the very beginning, they want a hamburger with 200 patties? We can't have that either, right? So we have to make sure that we set those parameters of maximum and minimum whenever we are taking in a value and whenever we are actually changing the value using the mutator method. So what we're going to do in here, we can copy and paste this in here if we want. Or what we can do instead, we can actually just call the method set patty and reuse this code, and this code is going to replace it with the correct. So we can either copy and paste this in here, but that's going to be a little more repetitive. So therefore, we're going to use the mutator method to be able to initiate the value of patty or p correctly. So now if we run it, even if we wanted 200, it's going to say, hold on, this, once you construct a hamburger, it's not going to be calling this method to set it to the correct value. And now we can do one for set cheese and set tomato, just in case they want to be able to say no tomato. But for now, we're just going to do one to be able to save time. Getter method. Getter method is to be able to get the information outside the method. So because those fields are private, they cannot be accessed directly outside they cannot be accessed from the outside of the class. So therefore, if we want to be able to access that information, we need to be able to place getter method. We're going to use public to use outside the class. It's going to be a non-static. It's going to return an integer, so it's not going to be void. It's going to be called get patty. Not taking any parameters, it's just going to return. And the only purpose of this method is to be able to return patty, the number of patties. So therefore, outside the method, if I want to be able to find out the number of patties for H1, I can say system.out.println. I say hamburger has H1 dot. I cannot say patty because that's a private field, private variable. So I have to use the getter method. So I'm going to say get patty to be able to access that number. So now I can run it, and it should say hamburger has 1 patty. And if I say hamburger H2, then you can tell me the second hamburger has 5 patties. So therefore, the setter method is to be able to change the value of the variables, of the instance variables. The getter method is to be able to get the values of the instance variables. Because they are private, they cannot be accessed directly from outside the class. And so let's see, we have our instance variables, we have constructors, we have our mutator methods, we have our getter method, we have our toString method, and the last will be our equal method, or equals method. Or equals, we're going to tell Java whether two objects are equal to each other. So we're going to say public is going to be a non-static method, so do not type in static. It's going to return whether two objects are equal to each other, so it's going to return a boolean. It's going to be called equals, right? Whenever we use two strings, we say dot equals, and then in parentheses we send in another string. So therefore, we're going to receive the same type of object, which is a hamburger, and we need to name it, so I must name it H. Now, we want to be able to tell Java how can we determine that two hamburgers are equal. So let's assume, because we will only build a getter method for patty, we only have access to the patty. So let's actually build a getter method for cheese. So get cheese. And we're going to return cheese. Next, let's go and do a getter method for tomato, public boolean get tomato. And the only purpose of this is to return tomato. Okay, so now we can actually go back and complete our equals method. So we're going to assume that two hamburgers are equal if they have the same amount of patties, the same amount of cheese, and whether they have this tomato, yes or no. So we can say if. We are going to compare the hamburger that's coming in with the one that we have. So it's going to be if h dot get patty is equal to the patties that we have, and we need a double equal sign to compare them. Remember that this is going to, this is a method. This is going to be returning an integer, and patty is an integer, and the only reason that we are able to use that here is because that's the field that's up there. And h dot get cheese is going to return an integer that is from the hamburger that's coming in, equal to cheese, and h dot get tomato is equal to tomato. Then that means that those two hamburgers are equal, so therefore we're going to return true. Otherwise, we're going to return false. Now remember that if this is true, it's going to go on to line 65, and it's going to return true, and that's it. It's not going to continue to line 66. Because if this is false, then it's just going to return, go into line 66, which returns false. And now, let's go into the main method, and now we can compare two hamburgers. So let's see, let's go and change this to just 2. And now we're going to say, are those two hamburgers equal to each other? So we're going to say system.out.println. We're going to say h1.equals h2. Remember that we need to send in another hamburger, so we send in h2, and that will compare them. And that should give me true or false unless I made a mistake doing the code. Get tomato should be a method, correct? So therefore, this should be double parentheses. And now we should be able to run it. and it tells me that's false. So now let's go and change it and say, we actually just want the second hamburger, we want it to be one patty, one cheese, and we want it to be true. So that way we can say that both of them are the same. And now if we run it, both hamburgers will be exactly the same, and then that works. So therefore, we have done our first class, which consists of the name of the class, or instance variables, which can be initialized here or just left without initializing it. It can be a constructor or constructors. In this case, we have two constructors. We have our mutator methods, or getter methods, or toString methods, and or equal methods. So this will conclude the lesson for today. Don't forget to click submit. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.